They've met women who were clever, radiant, bold. They've been drawn to energy, to charm, to emotional intensity. But one day, they meet someone who doesn't try to impress. She doesn't stand out. She doesn't shine brighter than anyone else. And yet, they find themselves unable to leave the moment. If she sends no signal, creates no attraction strategy, and speaks no language of pursuit, why do they still feel anchored by her presence? The feeling isn't loud. It doesn't overwhelm, but it unsettles. It makes them aware of their own armor without her ever trying to take it off. She's not doing anything. Yet somehow, they stop pretending. They stop performing. And that's where it begins. This video is not about personality types. It's not a breakdown of tactics or attraction strategies. It's about the subtle, powerful signs of a woman who carries a deep feminine energy, a presence so grounded that it haunts the man who stands before it. Well, explore these signs through the lens of Carl Jung's psychology, but not as abstract theory. Well, use simple, grounded language that speaks to lived experience, not concepts, but moments, not definitions, but recognition. But what the deep modern man begins to sense when faced with self-awareness. If one woman has ever stirred something in them without effort, maybe this is the real beginning. Maybe this is where shadow work Carl Jung becomes more than a concept. Like this video if it brought you value. Subscribe to Deep Modern Man to join the community, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next meaningful videos. And now, let's move into the core of today's content. The first sign of a woman who carries a powerful feminine energy is this. She brings a presence that asks for nothing, yet stays with them without condition. There are moments when they find themselves disturbed, not by words, not by actions, but by a presence. She doesn't ask for anything. She doesn't demand, persuade, or seduce. Yet somehow, they cannot maintain their usual defenses. Her silence doesn't comfort, nor does it confront, but it enters. It lingers. It dissolves the distance they once controlled so easily. They're not being threatened, but they can't escape. And this form of emotional attraction has no logic, no signal, no performance, just presence. A deep feminine presence that reaches where no conversation ever could. Why can't they play the same roles? Why does their confidence crumble without conflict? In front of her, the mask no longer holds. There's no judgment, but somehow they feel seen in a way that strips all pretense. She doesn't try to fix, doesn't ask for proof, but still, her gaze touches a layer rarely shown in any relationship, and that's where the haunting begins. They've been drawn to beauty, to charm, to softness, but this time, it's none of those. She gives no cues, yet her absence is impossible. The more they try to dismiss her, the deeper she embeds. The more they analyze, the less they understand. She becomes an emotional imprint, not through effort, but through stillness. And in that stillness, something inside refuses to look away. What they try to forget only becomes clearer. What they resist becomes undeniable, and they don't know why. Carl Jung described this as the effect of unconscious archetypes pressing against the ego. A woman who carries a powerful feminine energy often activates what he called the rejected self in a man, the part that longs to be seen without judgment, to be loved without effort. And when this happens, they don't fear rejection. They fear not knowing who they are without control. This is the very essence of shadow work Carl Jung taught. What you resist reveals where you're split. Her unconditional presence triggers that resistance. Not by force, but by simply not playing any role. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." He believed that becoming the true self does not come from achievement, but from touching a part of the psyche that is free from conditions. When a woman carries a powerful feminine energy, she does not ask for proof. She does not test, guide, or shape. She simply exists. And in her quiet presence, something buried within them begins to stir. not because she invites it, but because nothing in her demands it to hide. In that stillness, they are not required to speak. They are not asked to perform. Yet somehow, they feel seen. That is what breaks the pattern. This is what Anima Carl Jung described, the unconscious reflection of the unloved self. It is not a person. It is a presence. It is the mirror that appears when control fades and truth remains. She does not try to change them. Yet they change, not from effort, but because the armor cracks without a fight. That shift is not collapse. It is self-awareness returning. And if her presence keeps echoing long after she is gone, maybe it is not her they remember. Maybe it is the first moment they were seen without having to become someone else. The second sign of a woman who carries a powerful feminine energy is this. She holds stillness, but never walks away from the chaos inside them. When their emotions blur into confusion, most people around them either try to fix it or leave. But she does neither. She stays. She does not interrupt. She does not offer comfort. She does not run. She remains present without asking for anything in return. And in that silence, something rare happens. She becomes the only space where every truth inside the man can rise without being silenced. Why she doesn't respond the way others do. Why she is not startled by their brokenness. Why she never demands clarity from what is still tangled. They used to explain their feelings, or suppress them to appear stable. But with her, there is no need to perform, and what unsettles them is not the silence itself, but the fact that she does not use it to retreat. In the past, they would either hold tight to their image or expect someone else to speak, to rescue, to stabilize, but now, none of that works. She doesn't soothe, she doesn't vanish, her stillness disrupts their pattern. Carl Jung once explained that the shadow reveals itself not only through anger, but through helplessness, confusion, and silence. When the emotional system inside the man collapses, most people around try to define it or control it. But a woman who carries deep feminine presence does not get pulled into that storm. She does not confront the shadow. She does not walk away from it either. Her stillness allows the unconscious to surface within them, without being named too soon. In Jungian psychology, this is the beginning of emotional projection unraveling, not through words, but through uninterrupted space. And that is why they cannot define what she is. She is not a rescuer. She is not a threat. She is simply the one who stayed when no one else did. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. That is what Carl Jung wrote. And when a woman holds that stillness inside the man's emotional disarray, without trying to fix or escape it, something sacred begins. The unconscious begins to reveal its own structure. And it does so only in the absence of external pressure. Her energy doesn't soothe or solve, but it doesn't disappear. And that is what keeps them near. She did not protect herself from the breakdown. She did not run. She remained, not with words, but with presence. And if they still feel that stillness long after she's gone, perhaps what stays is not her comfort, but the part of their self that first awakened in the silence she refused to leave. Next, we explore the third sign of a woman who carries a powerful feminine energy. She has a sharp emotional awareness that sees what they are not yet ready to name. They do not realize what they are avoiding until she looks at them with eyes that do not rush. She says nothing about the change. She does not ask what is wrong, but they feel she already knows. That feeling does not make them want to run, but it also does not let them keep hiding. She does not ask them to explain. Yet something inside starts pushing them to be more honest with themselves. Why she can sense what they have not even admitted. Why one moment of silence, one pause, one look can unsettle their confidence. With her, the usual roles lose grip. They cannot pretend things are fine. They cannot act as if they are still in control. They were used to sharing only what they chose. Feelings were allowed only after they made sense. Vulnerability came only when safety was confirmed. But with her, none of that applies. She always seems one step ahead, not through words, but through presence. She sees what they hide, and because of that, they cannot keep living on two layers. Her presence does not demand truth, but it calls it forward. Carl Jung believed that repressed emotions do not vanish. They live in the unconscious and shape behavior. A woman with deep feminine presence does not chase those emotions, but her sensitivity becomes a mirror. She does not interpret. She does not explain. She simply reflects. And in that reflection, something they denied starts to rise. In shadow work, Carl Jung described, this is how the self begins to appear, not through thinking, through feeling seen. They cannot describe it clearly, but they know they cannot keep pretending nothing is happening inside. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Under the influence of feminine energy, the woman does not ask, does not interpret, but her presence alone begins to awaken what they have tried to suppress. The moment they are seen without words, something stirs, not thought, but a wave of emotion that had long been disconnected from awareness. What moves in them is not conscious choice. It is a response from what was never given permission to speak. And this is how the unconscious leads a life until it is named by the self. Her way of being, without definition, without pressure, is what allows that naming to begin. She does not replace their insight. She does not offer answers. But her knowing forces them to stop lying to themselves. And that is why they cannot dismiss the connection. If someone can sense the shift in them before they name it, what awakens is not just feeling. It is the part of the man that has never been named, the one that waited for someone to see it before it could come alive. The fourth sign she carries a powerful feminine energy is this. She does not make them fight to be loved, yet they cannot walk away. They do not feel held, but they do not feel abandoned either. Still, they cannot pull away from the sense of being connected. There is no message, no question, no demand to stay. And yet, she remains present in their thoughts. Something inside questions what force is keeping them near, when there is no effort to keep them. If a woman radiates feminine energy without strategy, without signals, and yet the man cannot leave her presence behind, then what part of them is reacting? What part is refusing to disconnect? And why does it feel like peace instead of pressure? They have known relationships shaped by control, emotional tension, strategic silence, the push and pull of attention, but she does none of that. She does not manipulate. She does not withdraw. She offers no roles to play. That stillness becomes the very reason they stay. Not because they are held, but because they are not being forced to hold anything. She does not challenge their behavior, but somehow they respond, not with defense, but with trust. Not to prove, but to preserve. Carl Jung believed we are drawn to what reflects the unconscious. In the presence of conflict, men often react with control or avoidance. They stay when they need to dominate. They leave when they feel caged. But this woman does not control. She does not ask. She does not chase. There is nothing to resist, nothing to conquer. And that emptiness breaks the pattern. The shadow they carry, the part convinced they must fight to stay loved, loses its ground. She does not make them fight. She does not let them drift. And in that balance, they encounter a version of themselves that does not rely on defense. Carl Jung's psychology says that when outer pressure fades, inner gravity takes over. Carl Jung once wrote, "Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. In her presence, they do not need to choose. Logic does not fight emotion. Connection does not compete with space. There is no need to resolve what was never forced, and so they stay. Not because of attachment, but because there is no tension. She does not hold them, but they stop running. She does not ask for anything, but they begin to give. not to win her over, but because for the first time they are not asked to perform in order to feel loved. And if they cannot walk away, maybe the bond is not to her, maybe it is to the self that no longer has to earn its place in the relationship. And here is the final sign: she carries a powerful feminine energy. She knows who she is without ever needing to say it. There is no message, no declaration, no attempt to impress with clarity or personal philosophy, and yet the man reacts as if he is standing before something solid. The clarity does not come from statements. It comes from the absence of confusion. That absence unsettles him, not because it demands something, but because it gives no hint of how to respond. If she does not define herself, if she does not prove or insist, then what is it they are responding to? And why does that silence feel more powerful than any performance they have seen before? Their usual ways of reading people stop working. There are no roles, no postures, no signals to decode. In most relationships, they categorize people: who seeks attention, who needs protection, who tries to earn value. But with her, none of those apply. She does not try to stand out, but she cannot be overlooked. She does not claim space, but she never disappears from it, and that contradiction breaks their defenses. There is nothing to fight, nothing to manage, but everything in them feels exposed. Carl Jung explained that what stirs a response without being named is the work of an archetype. When the man cannot place her in any familiar category, but still feels deeply moved, it means something unconscious has been touched. A woman with deep feminine presence becomes a mirror. She reflects not with effort, but with wholeness. That wholeness disturbs the parts in them still fragmented. Jungian psychology sees this moment as when the ego loses its reason to resist, because no pressure is being applied. Her lack of need for approval becomes the condition for their inner defenses to slow down, and in that stillness, their unconscious patterns start to surface. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." She does not challenge them, but she also does not let them hide. There is nothing to fix, nothing to reshape, and without anything to reflect back who they thought they were, their strategies collapse. What remains is the self they often avoid, and that is what truly shakes them. She is not magnetic because she wants to be seen. She is magnetic because she is not trying to be anything. And when the man cannot walk away, not out of desire, but out of presence, it means the energy at work is not external. If she says nothing, shows nothing, demands nothing, yet they still stay, then what holds them there is not attraction. It is the moment they stand in front of a self that cannot be bargained with. They are not drawn to her because of what she says, nor because she does anything that demands attention. Their reaction begins in places where logic fades, in the stillness between words, in the absence of effort, and that is what makes it unforgettable. What moves them is not her. It is the part inside them that wakes up in front of a presence that asks for nothing. She does not define herself. She does not convince. She does not chase recognition. But in doing none of that, she removes their ability to define her. They cannot fit her into roles. They cannot defend against what does not attack. And that is how they begin to face parts of themselves, still unnamed. Places where emotional projection once covered their need for self-awareness. Carl Jung once said, "The true self begins to emerge only where polarization ends." She brings no conflict, but she does not allow hiding. She does not reach for them, yet something in them is reached. And her feminine energy, untouched by the need for approval, becomes an archetype too alive to ignore, a deep feminine presence that bypasses defense and stirs the self from underneath. If all of this haunts them without effort, then what holds them is not her intention. It is the self, the one that now remembers what it feels like to exist, without needing explanation. And if they still wonder why they cannot forget her, maybe the question is not about her. Maybe the real question is this: what part of them came alive the moment no one asks them to become anyone else in the relationship.